What's going on, folks? Ted from Immersion here, and there is some really big potential news. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying, first of all, PAX was an absolute blast, and if anybody's curious and wants to hear more about what happened or the fun times I had or what stuff I got, let me know, and I'll make a video dedicated to that. I also have at least one interview that I conducted while I was there that I will be posting later this week. I was actually interviewed myself for a couple of things, which was kind of bizarre and weird to me. But either way, I want to preface this by saying this is a purely speculative video, but it's founded in some truth, I guess. I don't know. You be the judge. But I also want to say, if you are a fan of Penny Arcade and the Acquisitions Incorporated series, there will be some spoilers here for what happened at PAX Unplugged. So if you watch this and you want this to be organic and you don't want to know what happened, this is your spoiler warning. Click away, go watch the latest video. You might not be able to find it on YouTube yet, but you can find the back broadcasts on Twitch. Although, be forewarned, I had 45 ads in my 2-hour watch through of that on Twitch, by the way, because I missed the live show. So, spoiler warning, we are now going to talk about what happened at Acquisitions Incorporated at PAX Unplugged 2022. So, if you haven't seen it, or if you don't care, or you have seen it and you just want to know, it ended. Acquisitions Incorporated, this 14 to 15 year campaign that started in 2008, has officially ended. It started way back when with Mike and Jerry, and you had a whole bunch of different hosts and guests and things over the years. Will Wheaton was on some. It's been a crazy, wild ride. And while I haven't watched every single episode of Acquisitions Incorporated, I definitely watched everything that started when it was in 5th edition. And I'm a fan. I'm definitely a fan. I like the content. I love watching the dynamic at the table. I love PAX shows. I've been going to PAX East for about 8 years. I've been at every PAX Unplugged there's ever been. I love this stuff. So you're hearing this from a fan, but that's just so you are aware. But yeah, it ended. And it was kind of a heart-warming, I wouldn't call it 100% like a tearjerker, but it was an emotional ending to the show. And I don't think anybody in the audience was going in expecting that. It really took everybody by surprise. And, at the end, they did their little bit of announcements that they do, sponsors and whatnot. And then they said, but there's one more thing, roll the tape. And when they rolled that tape is what we're going to talk about here, because it might give us some insight into what's happening in 2023 and the possibility of a return to Dark Sun for 5th edition or possibly 1 D&D. So let me go ahead and show you this video here. Shit. Cue the doves.
Josh, where the fuck are my doves?
Okay. So, for those of you who don't know, that was Mike Krahulik, co-creator of Penny Arcade. Jerry Holkins, who plays Omen Drawn in all of these, is, again, someone who's been there. And I think it was I don't know if it was in 2020 with the onset of COVID or 2021. At some point, Mike made the decision that he was going to basically step away from PAX and going to the conventions He'd been doing it for, however many years PAX had been around, and he was going to step away. He was typically one of the mainstays at the Acquisitions Incorporated table. So we haven't seen Jim Dark Magic, Mike's character, or Mike himself in one of these Penny Arcade shows for quite a while. At least a year and a half, maybe 2 years. So he's here in this video. We know it's a series 2, so nothing crazy there, right? It's the end of a campaign, and as many of us know, when you finish a campaign, you more often than not, people don't like finish their D&D campaign and be like, well, I'm done. I'm never playing Dungeons and Dragons again. That part of my life is over. You move on to a new campaign. And there were some setups, and I don't want to spoil this part, but there were some setups leading to the end of the previous adventure that happened in that episode at PAX Unplugged that I think is going to be what the purpose of this series 2 is going to be about. And, well, I may spoil that a little bit later, but we'll get to that. So, what can we take away from this? Well, it's coming next year, which is reasonable. I'm assuming the debut will be at PAX East in, like, March or April, whenever PAX East is officially happening. And I assume that will be the starter of this series 2. Perhaps Mike will be back. It seems like it. It also could be a web series. For a while there, a couple years ago, Penny Arcade did release an Acquisitions Incorporated series. It was a weekly show. It wasn't live. It was just a weekly video released on YouTube that they had pre-recorded like a whole season of the show and released it in pieces. So perhaps that's what they'll do. Or maybe this is, again, just they're going to kick it off at PAX. That seems more than likely what they would do, as it's like a good big venue to kick it off. But what I'm curious about is it says coming 2023 to Kickstarter. Now, Penny Arcade and the folks behind it are jokesters. They're funny people. So perhaps that was a joke, but I don't think so. So it's coming to Kickstarter. Now, if you didn't know, back in, like, was it 2019, the Acquisitions Incorporated book launched for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, which is an official WotC product in conjunction with Penny Arcade. Previous to that, there were conversations that Jerry Holkins had about looking to go to Kickstarter to make their own Acquisitions Incorporated book. They were going to do it themselves because people were so interested in it. But then Wizards of the Coast said, no, let's do it together. So that's how we got the Acquisitions Incorporated book. So perhaps this series 2, they want to have a new book with new subclasses, races, whatever they're going to do, and they want to do it themselves. But there was also something interesting that you may have missed at the start of that video that I'll need to go back and show you. And let me get to it. It is right here. Do you see the one book on screen that they showcase here? Mind Lords of the Last Sea, the Wanderer's Chronicle here. And this right here, Dark Sun. There's very clearly the one, like, D&D book that we see very clearly on screen for this. And, like, it comes out of frame and then very clearly comes into frame and is focused on, is a Dark Sun book. So, for those of you who also don't know, a little history lesson on Acquisitions Incorporated, it started as a podcast when 4th edition launched as a means to, it was basically one of the first ever live play podcasts out there, or especially one of the first ever live shows. And they were doing it as a means to promote 4th edition Dungeons & Dragons and have people behind it. And then eventually it transitioned to 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. And they also typically use it as a means to intro or talk about a new season, adventure or something that's happening in the D&D space. I remember it was like PAX East 2019, 2018 maybe. I think it was 20, or maybe even 2017. It ended with them not being able to resurrect somebody because they were afflicted by a death curse. And nobody knew what the death curse was until that fall when Tomb of Annihilation released and we learned about the death curse. So they use it to talk about future seasons. They kind of went into the Underdark when Out of the Abyss was becoming a thing. So they use that as sort of a like a high profile way to segue a lot of this stuff. So Could this mean that Dark Sun is in fact coming to 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons? Why is it coming via Penny Arcade, and why is it coming via Kickstarter? Those are all important questions, and unfortunately we don't have any specific answers, but I have some theories, and I want to discuss them with all of you, and I'm curious what your thoughts are, so let me know in the comments. One, a lot of people have been clamoring for Dark Sun in 5th edition, but also people have, rightfully so, explained that there's a lot of problematic content that existed in Dark Sun when it was created that's not fit for the world today. Probably wasn't even really fit for the world back then, but it was a different time frame. So how would you alter it? Would it even still be, this is what I've heard, would it still be Dark Sun if it's changed? And honestly, I've also seen a lot of people say with the way WotC handled Spelljammer, do we even want them to talk about and go back and revisit old campaign settings? Because if everything's going to get the Spelljammer treatment, people don't want it. But this is something different because it's not necessarily coming from Wizards of the Coast. It's coming from Penny Arcade, and it's also coming via Kickstarter and crowdfunding. So perhaps the Dark Sun book drop there is unrelated to anything, but I don't think so. It seems too, in the forefront there to it just to be. It could have been any book. It could have been a 5th edition player's handbook. It could have been the Acquisitions Incorporated book. But instead it's Dark Sun. So does that mean we're going to get Dark Sun, but then WotC's not doing it? It's being crowdfunded? So another thing that I've talked about in the past is how one of the biggest potential lost profits that Wizards of the Coast has is all of these Kickstarters out there that are using the open game license, where people are using the contract that they have via the open game license to produce content and make hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars on these supplements that, Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast is losing out potentially on that profit by not getting any piece of it because it's produced under the open game license. So perhaps this is their foray into, quote, official content that's crowdfunded to see how well it does. But it's all guised under being Penny Arcade. I also wonder if this is going to be sort of like a Disney Touchstone Pictures situation. If you're unfamiliar, Disney, obviously the studio, this was before they owned everything in the world. They also had like a Touchstone Pictures was a part of Disney. And if they wanted to release a video that didn't really fit with the Disney brand, they could release it under Touchstone. And it would still technically be a Disney film, but it was a Touchstone picture. So it was like a sub-studio, I guess you could call it. So I wonder if they're going to try to do that possibly with Penny Arcade, to have them release something like they'll do Dark Sun. It's still technically a WotC product, but they can have that degree of separation. So like if things go poorly, they can be like, well, it's not ours. But if things go well, they can be like, well, it's ours. And then, I don't know if the cartoony nature of the kind of goofy, silly way Acquisitions Incorporated is typically played, and the cool, and the cartoony art style is a way to possibly adjust and tweak Dark Sun to make it less problematic. I'm not sure, but I also wonder if this couldn't be a means to prototype test 1D&D, right? We'll release it as a Kickstarter, so we'll see how things go and use it to sort of test the waters and see how things are. There's a lot of weird things happening with this, and I've seen a little bit of buzz about it, but I'm curious what you think. And then lastly, for my final spoiler, which will be the end, which is the ending of the adventure at PAX Unplugged. So this is the actual end of the story. So consider this a big spoiler. Skip ahead if you don't want to hear it, or go watch it and come back. The last thing that happened is Acquisitions Incorporated was basically destroyed and being burnt to the ground, absolutely wrecked. It was all over. And Jasmine Ballard, who plays Certainty Drawn, who's Omen Drawn's daughter, had a gift from the Feywild and essentially wished that Acquisitions Incorporated would be protected And that was kind of the nature of this teddy bear she received from the Feywild. It's a long story from a previous adventure, but either way. And what happened was she, like, popped out of existence when she made that wish. And what we learned from Jeremy Crawford, who is DMing, is that she will be transported back in time 14 years to the founding of Acquisitions Incorporated to right all of the wrongs that were conducted by AC Inc. from the start, to make sure that it doesn't end up where it ended up at the end of the adventure, where it's absolutely wrecked and destroyed. So that seems to be, based on what they said, the premise of Acquisitions Incorporated Series 2 is to go back to the start and redo everything. But that also fits with this thing we've been talking about with this possible Tyranny of Dragons reset coming in January, where Wizards of the Coast may just be re-releasing content over the course of the next couple of years to update things to be more 1D&D compatible, or to test out new concepts for 1D&D. And then I also thought it funny that their one kind of promo produced and the one kind of actual play that they actually work on and contribute to is Acquisitions Incorporated, and they're also rebooting that back to its start to start telling that story over again. So I wonder if we're going to see more old stuff coming back in a reprised fashion. Again, purely speculative, I don't know, but I feel like let's watch that scene where the Dark Sun book comes out now that you've seen and what I showed you. How very, like, it's very clearly not just like a throwaway thing. I feel it's purposeful. Let's watch it one more time. All right, it's coming after the ghost says, like, right, it's right here. Like that, and you see that underneath it too is an Acquisitions Incorporated green flame foam finger right here. The Acquisitions Incorporated logo, and it is very clearly Dark Sun. So, like, nothing else happens really in the video that's tied to... I mean, there's an owl bear that's very clearly 3D printed. Got a storm giant. Says the Mad Raven. I don't think that's anything specific. We see this is, again, the mugs they use. These are what they use to roll on stream. There's Jim taking his cape. Jim Dark Magic's cape. Let's see. Hang on. I didn't look at this. Ooh, hang on. Okay. That says Jim Dark Magic. I can't really read what that says. Maybe somebody else can figure that out, but this looks to be just like a DM's notebook. So perhaps Mike is going to be the DM? Just looking, I don't see any other... Again, here's a Jim Dark Magic portrait here. I don't think there's apples to apples. I don't think there's anything we can really pull from this background image here. Okay, here's that book. Look again, right here. We've got a Voodoo Ranger. That's kind of like one of their beers, right? But then we can see Clank Acquisitions Incorporated. Here's the, a couple of miniatures. But that book is prominently placed right here in the front. Again, this Dark Sun book.
Shit. Cue the doves. Josh, where the fuck are my doves?
So, anyway, I don't know, but it is news, at least in my opinion, and I'm curious to see what all of you think. Is it truly coming to Kickstarter? I believe so. Is it going to be Dark Sun? Yeah, I think that was intentional, but let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below. I'll see you all next time.